On 17th of February this year, .NET turned 20. And as part of the anniversary, Microsoft unveiled .NET 7 Preview 1, as well as Entity Framework 7 Preview. And they've said that this is the beginning of the next 20 years of .NET. And me being a fan of .NET, I was actually excited and really wanted to try out this new feature. So I was like, what if I just did a video of it, so somebody else might also want to know what really changes are. So I'm going to build an API in this video, although I intend to do the same with gRPCs and then Blazor and possibly do something on the .NET MAUI. So that's what I want to do in this video. So we're going to build a simple API. We're going to bring our dependencies and then use dependency injection to register the services using the container. We're going to pretty much bring in a repository pattern. We're going to do all the mappings. We're going to bring Entity Framework 7. And we're going to see how all these things actually tie up together and really put to test the promises that Microsoft has promised with .NET 7, which we're going to discuss as the video goes. And if you're new to this channel, my name is Simuzache Kalo, and this is Code and Parallel, where our main goal is really just to simplify this whole process, whereby we use simple examples, simple explanations, and we try to demystify the technical stuff. So if that's what you are really interested in, then do like, share, comment, subscribe. And if you're interested, let's go on this journey where we're going to test out .NET 7. So thank you very much. So here we are in Visual Studio 2022 preview. If you're using something other than that, it's not going to make 7 preview. So just note that. You're going to click Create New Project. You're going to select ASP.NET Core Web API. You're going to click Next. We're going to create a movie management APIs. So that'll be the name of the project. But for a solution, I want you to call it just service. Movie management service, because you could have unit test, you could have a lot. So the solution name really has to encompass everything, just to a general name. All right, you're gonna click Next. For the framework, obviously we're doing .NET 7 preview. You could leave the list as default, and then you're gonna click Create. And it's going to go out of its way, and it's going to create for you a project. All right, so here we are. You will see that by default it comes with there's a weather forecast class there, which is just what we call a plain odd C# class. It's just more like a model. All right, we're not going to use this, but I just want to show you what comes out of the box. So you're going to see there's a weather forecast there class, and then you see that there's the program.cs class, arguably the most important class as far as APIs are concerned, or in general. You see that all we're doing in the first line there, we're just setting up the builder. All right, if you're coming from the old .NET 5 and before that, we used to have a setup class which would do this, but now that was merged into one class. Down here you're going to see there's what we call a container. So a container, a dependency injection container. This is where you're going to declare your dependencies. These are services that your application depends on. For instance, here you would see there's add controller. So this one, we're going to use controllers, obviously. So we're adding it there as a dependency. So there's one place where it manages those services. Okay. And then you're seeing what we call add swag gen. Those are just Swagger, which you'll see once you go to the browser. They're just beautiful interfaces used for testing your applications. From there, you see that this is the pipeline. You've got app.use HTTPS redirection. So just telling it in the pipeline, I want you to enable authorization, enable HTTPS, okay, and map those controllers. And at the end of the line there, you see this app.run. So you're saying run this. So if we got any dependencies, they're gonna come in this file. All right. Then we've got app settings.json. This is where you keep your what we call value key pairs. As you can see here, for now you've got logging. So logging is like an object, and it has sub properties over there. So if we want to bring things like connection string to our database, which we're going to do, we're going to put it here. So this is for that information that you might want to use as soon as but now your app is hosted, you want to change a few things dynamically. This is where you do it. Think of it as a place where you can put your constants. And then we've got controllers. So controllers just show you, this is what the one who wants to consume your API, the API client, phrase with. So this is access to your API. It's the controllers. So the post, get, put, delete, they are just the functions that use controllers. So you could have post, which is used to create something. You have delete to delete. You've got update, which is put. So the controller is just the endpoint, which the interface which the user sees. All right. Pretty much that's what's very, very, very important. So at this juncture, I'm going to delete the weather focus class because we don't need that. And I'm also going to delete the controller so that we can start from scratch. All right, so at this juncture, we're going to create what the consumers are going to see, what the clients are going to see. So whatever the clients are going to see is done in the controllers class. So let's go ahead and create that. So go to the controllers folder, right click. I want you to say add and select controller. Now for some reason it defaults to the MVC controller, but that's not what we want. We want the API controller under common, and it should have read write actions. That's fine. And add, and we're going to call this movies controller. All right, so call it movies controller. All right, yep, and press enter. So I've started a read write one, which is going to come out with some of those things which are pre-added. I'll just go through it briefly. You're going to see the namespace. So the namespace is just telling you where it resides within a unique environment, right? And down there you're seeing route API / controller. So all we're saying is this is the route into which whoever decides to consume our application is going to follow. All right, so they're going to come with API / controller. Now, whatever is in the square brackets there, it's just telling you that's dynamic. It means if you put movie controller there, it's going to hit the endpoint. But we'll try to use conversion here over configuration. So if you just put the word movie there, and I think I've misspelled that. Let me just rename that real quick. Okay. Press enter. All right. So this means it's API / movies. You know, you might even write something like movies. You can even hard code it over there, and this would still do whatever this is. Now, I've seen most guys debate over this. What's the best way to do it? Well, personally, I prefer that you hard code there and you put movies. I'm saying this because you might down the line change the name of the class. The route will still be the same, okay? But if you change the name of the class, the route will also change, and that, if somebody is consuming an API, it becomes a problem. Their client application might crash. All right. So for this, I'm going to put the movies. But even if you put controller and you're careful, you should be fine. At the end of the day, it's really what really works, okay, and the conversions you decide to use. The second one is API controller. So these are called decorators. So the API controller there just lets you know that this controller is going to be API rich, okay, which now conforms to a RESTful API. Then you've got movie controller. It is it inherits from the controller base. This just gives you things out of the box, things like action result, things like returned, which you don't have to code from scratch. You can just implement from there. All right, and then we'll see that the first you've got HTTP GET. So this is a GET request. If you hit that endpoint and give it a GET verb, it's going to hit this endpoint. It's that easy. If you're going to hit the GET and give an ID, it's going to hit this. If you're going to give it post, it's going to hit this. If you're going to give it put, delete, it's going to hit that. So since we're just setting it up in advance, we want to have a place where we can get all movies, get a single movie, create movies, delete movies, and update movies. So we're going to basically write that as we go. Right now we're just trying to set up the endpoint. So the best way to do is you're going to use action result, because this is going to give you the potential to return the RESTful responses. So if I put return here, so I could put return there. Okay, so we're just putting this just to test. Okay, we're going to say this is a GET request, for instance. So that would be here, and you could just copy all of that. Let's just copy it and bring it down there. Okay, and then here you can bring it over there, and you're going to say this is a GET request with ID, and then you're going to bring it there. You're going to say this is a post request, and here you're going to say this is a put request, and down there you could just say this is a delete request. So this is just us trying to just, so those errors are because it needs an action result to actually know what to send back. So just put action result over there. So we're just setting up where the client is going to hit. All right. So at this juncture, I want you to press Ctrl F5 just to test to see if the endpoints really are behaving as expected. All right. So once you do that, you're going to open up with Swagger. So you'll see that this is an interface that's got Open API. It is at standard. So let's just test it to see if it's really responding as we expect. So I want you to go to click Get, try it out, and execute. Let's see the response that comes from there. And if we could scroll down, you'll see that it says this is a GET request. All right, so we'll do the same for the post. Try it out and click execute. You will see that this is a post request. That's fine. Let's use the other GET. ID, and then it's going to tell you this is a GET request with ID. Nice. Let's try the put. Try it out. This is a put request. Great. And finally, let's try the delete. Let's put one over there. Execute. And this is a delete request. So our endpoints are actually behaving how we expect it to behave. All right. So the next piece of business here is to create a place where they're going to get that information from. All right. So we've successfully done our controllers. Now we have to create the modules and our temporary data store. So you want, when somebody hits the controller, to somehow talk to something that really plays with the database. So in our case, it's going to be a repository. So this repository will be responsible for the data access, things like adding, creating, updating. So it will be responsible for that. So first of all, what do you really want to have? That should be the question. And this is a movie management API. So we're going to have, obviously, a a model of movies, right? So let's create a folder, call that folder models, and within that we're going to create a class. We're going to call it movie. All right, so I'm keeping everything at a minimum here so that we just focus on the API aspect of it. So you might be surprised that things like error handling are done at a minimum. I think we're going to have proper videos that really discuss that specific topic, so we just focus on that thing. So watch the space. So I'm just going to have an ID. Thank you, Visual Studio. It's going to have a name. Thanks once again. And what else do you want to have? Let's just give it a cost. All right, so give it a cost. And let's just, make it, oh, sorry about that. Let's just make it string.empty. All right, so this should be enough to really take the point home. So we're going to manipulate this object, okay? When we go to an actual database, it's going to be a database table, right? But in real sense, you would have movies, you could have categories, a lot of tables, but we just want to zero in on the API. Again, we're going to do this entity framework tutorial, so where we're going to go deep on how to do that. So you could comment if you really need something specific to the data access, and we could wire up something that would address that issue. So all right, now that's our model. So model done. Now let's go to create the repository and our temporary data store. So I want you to create a folder called repository. I'll click add the new folder repository, right? And within that, we're going to have our movie repository, which should be responsible for those database interactions, right? So create a class and a repository. Call that class movie repository. All right. Now we said first thing is we're going to create our data store. Okay. So we're going to start off with something temporary, just a list. Okay. So this is not permanent. All right. So what do I mean by that? I mean, at build, it will revert to the values set below. Okay. We just want to see a repository in action. Then we're going to give it access to. We're going to give it the capability to talk to a database. Okay. So it's baby steps, one step at a time, so that you understand how all these tiny pieces combine together to really give you a fully fledged API. So we're going to have a public static. It's going to be a list of that movie which we just created in the model. All right. So control dot to bring it in. All right. Control dot. There we have it. So we're going to call it movies, and I'm going to initialize 3 movies. So these movies are movies I used to watch as a kid. So ID is going to be 1. The name is going to be this movie I used to watch. It's called Eastern Condos. If you can relate, you might as well comment. So 300. Okay, so we just want to have 3 movies. Okay. I don't know, maybe 3 is a special number. The other movie I watched as a kid, what was it called? It was called Deadly Prey. Let's give it ID 2. ID 3. There's this other movie, I think it was by Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's called Double Impact. Alright. This could be 500. This could be 400. So it means whenever we build our application, this information will be available. Okay, as we're using the API, we could add more here, but the moment we rebuild, it's going to go back to this 3. Hence my point that this is a permanent. So great, we have built our data store. Now we need to build our repository to give it now its functionality. Okay, so I want to get all movies. That's one of its functionality. And I want to get a single movie, and by something that's unique. So this, in this case, an ID will be unique. and you want to create a movie. You might also want to update a movie. And finally, you'd want to delete a movie. Right. So our repository will have these 5 functions at a bare minimum, right? Okay, so public. If you want to get all movies, then you need to have a list. It's going to give you back a list. A list of what? A list of movies. And remember that our data store is on top there. So you're going to call this public list get all movies. So this obvious, it won't take anything to do with. Okay, so you're saying at get all movies, just return me the whole list. All right, fair enough. Now you want to get a single movie. So public, we won't get a list, we just get that movie object. Get movie by ID. So enter ID. And before you get it, you have to find out, does a movie exist? So var, it's a movie from list is equal to movies dot you use where, but I prefer using first or default. Okay, and then obviously you're gonna have to check, does a movie exist? Because you don't want to continue doing operations. So if it's not equal to null, then you could return the movie from the list, right? Otherwise, let's just throw an exception. So throw new argument. So now exception. You just say that movie does not exist. All right, nice. Okay, how does one create a movie? So we're also going to return that movie when we create it, so that the user can see. So create movie. But for you to create a movie, you need to have the whole movie object. So movie, and you're going to say get your movies, and you just want to add movie, right? And just return the movie. And your next order of business would be to update a movie. So you're also going to return that updated movie. Okay. Some people retain it, some people don't. So you first of all, you need to have an ID, which will be used to, because you can't update what doesn't exist. So first of all, you want to go and check if that exists, and then if it exists, you want to give it a movie object. So we could borrow that to find. So we could say, let's try to find, and if the movie from list is not equal to null, then you're going to say, I want the movie from list, change the name. The name should be equal to whatever movie you've given us over there, and whatever name that is. And we also want to say movie from list and change the cost. Purposefully, we're not going to change the ID because that's a unique identifier. It's going to make more sense when you get the database. You don't want to change that. All right. So that once that goes through, you could return the movie which you've given us. All right. If that fails, if it doesn't exist, then just give us an exception. All right. Perfect. Then how do we delete? For deleting is easy. So public, I also return the movie you've deleted. I'm going to say delete movie, and this is going to take an int ID. Again, we're going to borrow that to check if the movie does exist. All right. If the movie exists, meaning the movie list from the list is not equal to null, then you're going to say movies dot remove, and remove takes in an object. That object will be the movie from the list. and just return the movie from the list. All right, otherwise just tell them that the movie doesn't exist, throw an exception. All right, and there you are. Your repository is up and loaded. So what I want you to do now is to go to the controllers where the user is going to interface the API client and implement this class there. So once you implement this class there, we're going to try again and play around to see if we're going to get what we need. So I want you to head over to the controller folder, the movies controller. All right, so as you can see, we need to have for us to use the movie repository, we need to have an instance of it. So let's create an instance of it. All right, so I know you might be looking at this and saying, why are you using a class there? This is a step-by-step process. I want to show you how it's done and then how we can properly bring in dependency injection. So just bear with me. So movie repository is equal to a new movie repository. All right. Okay, so the first option is to retain all movies. All right, so we're going to say this is get all movies. To help the Open API Swagger, you can just give it whatever it's expecting. This helps to do with its documentation. If that's a challenge, we can also do another video on how to document using Open API. So here we're going to say var movies from repository that is. We're going to say movie repository dot you've got get all movies, like so. And this guy is complaining. I think we have to bring that guy in from the models. So movie from repo, and all you do here is just give us, and what have I done? And all you do here is just give us the movies from repo, like so. All right. This will give us return a movie instance. So we're going to say var movie from repo is equal to movie repository dot get movie by ID, and we're going to give it the ID over there. And we're going to say if move from repo is not equal to null, then we want you to return. Now a status okay means it worked. Okay, so okay, and whatever you put in the brackets is just whatever you want the user to see. You could put even like it worked. All right, so we're going to put movie from repo. Okay, if it doesn't exist, then you have to tell the client that it's not found. They need to know. So you want to communicate that, well, whatever you're looking for is not found. All right, you can even put a message there if you want to say movie not found. Okay, whatever makes you happy there. All right, fine. I want to create. For us to create, since we're saying we're going to still return the movie, one there. From body means your post request is going to get from the body. By default, even if you don't put this, it will know, but just for readability, it depends with your team. If this makes sense for you, you leave it there. If it doesn't, you're going to remove it. So it doesn't make sense for me, so I'm going to remove that. But I want to give it a movie object. Okay. So programming, sometimes it's all about being pragmatic. Microsoft has given you their thought process. If it doesn't work with you, you can always change, as long as it makes sense in your context and it doesn't bring problems. Okay, so you're going to say var created movie is equal to movie repository dot create movie that gets in what? That gets in a movie. Well, you could say that was created, and you could just send back the created movie, like so. All right, let's move on. We have put. So put takes in an ID, and it also takes in that movie. So I'm going to remove again here from body, because in my head I know that from body is always there. By default, you should use from body, right? If you're following RESTful. But again, do what really works in your setting. Okay, so var updated movie is equal to movie repository dot what? Update movie. So this takes in ID in the actual movie. All right. So here, let me just add more because this could be null. So you can say if created movie, because if it fails to create, it's not going to give you, is it equal to null? Then you could return the okay. All right, I guess. Return okay, otherwise return not found. So bear with me, it's just me going all out. It's not perfect. All right, so we could do the same here. Could say if updated movie is not equal to null, then I want you to return an okay and just give me the updated movie. Oh, this is fun. You just gotta enjoy programming, guys. The aura still feels like the first time. So if that, then tell them this is not found. You could say movie not found, failed to update. Okay. All right. And then finally, we're going to deal with the delete. So var deleted movie is equal to movie repository. Oh wow, thank you. And if so, Microsoft has this AI that really sees how you code and then it suggests, as you can see. This is a fresh install of Visual Studio, but over time it's actually getting how I code and it's updating. Okay, again, it's not really a replacement for bad code. You just have to know how to code, because if you do it poorly, it's gonna get that poor coding. So still, fundamentals are important. So if that, then you want to return an okay with whatever you deleted. Otherwise, you're gonna have to tell your consumers that it was not found, and you don't want to give too much information, because just say it wasn't found. They will know. You don't have to over justify or throw exceptions. So keep it at a minimum. That really helps for security. Movie not found. All right. So a quick recap. What have we done in this video before we test it? So we've said we need to have a model, which was the movie. So we said we're gonna have this table somewhere. All right. It might be one in this video, but you could have multiple. Right, then we said fine, how do you get to that table? How do you interact with that? You're going to have a data store. Since we don't have a database, we've created our own data store. And then we said let's give our repository functionality, and we've done that. Now I want us to press Ctrl F5 and let's take this baby for a spin. All right, so our Swagger is loading up, so let's see. So we're gonna say use the get. Let's get our movies, try it out, execute. What do we get? Nice. So we get all the movies. So the ID 1, 2, 3. Okay, number 3 is double impact. Now let's pause. Let's try to create a movie. Maybe one that most people can relate to. Let's give it ID 4. I'm gonna give it final destination 3, maybe $1,000. Execute. Oh, okay, it comes back. Now for us to see if it's there, let's go to get our movies, and there it is. Nice. Okay, so we've done get our movies, we've done post, create. Let's get a movie by ID. So let's try the 4, which we just created, and the final destination 3 comes. That's just beautiful. And then we want to put, I'm gonna change final destination. It's final destination 3. I'm gonna make it final destination 1. Okay, and it's gonna be final destination FD 1. From 1,000, it's gonna be $800. And I want us to execute that. And there it comes, number 4. And get our movies to verify if it's changed. And there it is, it's changed. And now the last bit of it all is to delete that 4. So I'm going to put a 4 over there, and I'm going to execute, and it showed me whatever it has deleted. Wanted to find out, get all movies, and it should have 3 movies. All right. So at this juncture, I would say congratulations, you've built a fully fledged API. Now from here, we're going to move to the next session, where it is how can we make our code better by bringing dependency injection and the repository pattern. All right. So we need to make our code better. You know, as developers, one of our biggest goals is to create code that's unit testable, it's easy to maintain, and it's just readable. We don't want to break a lot of changes if a new requirement comes in. So let us talk a little bit about dependency injection and the repository pattern. If you look at our code here, you'll see the new keyword here. Now that should give you sleepless nights by any means necessary, because that could be what we call a coding smell. That shows you that you should pretty much improve. All right, what do I mean by that? This controller is a class, right? And within our class, we've got another class being created, which is the movie repository class. So we're newing up an instance of another class within a class. That's what we call a dependency. So class movie controller depends on the movie repository. Now that's what we call tightly coupling, you know, because we don't really know what's happening in movie repository. We don't know how it's going to react. We don't know about its behavior. So we want a class to declare its assets, a class to let us know that for you to use the movie controller, you need to have these dependencies. We need to know that beforehand, okay? Usually that's what we call dependency inversion principle, whereby we are, instead of us depending it down here, we want to give it for instance in the constructor. So you could call that constructor dependency injection, whereby you're saying, when you're constructing your class, create for me these dependencies as well, all right? So that's what we call DIP. And then you've got IOC, inversion of control. We want to bring an abstraction here using interfaces. So we don't want our class, the movie controller, to tightly depend on that. So we're going to use dependency injection. Now, ideally, what you do is you're going to bring in a dependency injection container. So what a DI container does, as it's also called sometimes, it manages this dependency. So it resolves these dependencies. It sees, okay, this depends on that. It does that in real time. But Microsoft saw it wise to say, you know what, guys, we don't want you to worry about things like dependencies. Things like the dependency injection container. So if you go to the program.cs class, you'd see that here there's what we call add services to the container. There's a comment there. So this is a way of Microsoft saying, we don't want you to worry about that so much. So Microsoft has a dependency injection container built in as the foundation of every .NET Core application. So you need to understand what dependency injection is. In this video, I'm going to tell you what you need to understand. But on this channel, I also have videos which will be in the description, which if you want to see more, you could go there, because you can even change this dependency injection container and put your own. All right. But this video should suffice. Should you want more, then go to the description and really check that out. All right. So we want to do two things. We want to do a dependency inversion principle, and we want to do an inversion of control. All right. First step. Who is bringing the dependency? It's the movie repository. That's the one we want to tackle. In other words, we don't want to have the word new here. Right. So stay with me. Now go to the repository class, open the movie repository. All right. I want you to go to public class movie repository. Go to the movie repository, put your cursor over there, and right click. And if you right click, I want you to select quick actions and refactoring. So click that, and there'll be options. I want you to select extract interface. It's gonna bring a dialog box. You want to call it I movie repository. So the word I there is for interface. It's like a generic. It's like a standard. You don't have to put it, but we put it to understand. All right. So you want it in a new file, and you want it to have all those. So you see, it has picked get a movie. It's picked all the functions. So you want all those functions, and then click OK. What's an interface? So an interface is just a contract. It stipulates what needs to be done. All right. So let me open the interface, which has been created here. This interface has 5 functions. It has create movie, it has delete movie, it has get movies, it has get movie by ID, and update movies. You would see that unlike the class which we built, the movie repository, we had functions and implementation. Now an interface just says, these are the functionalities I want you to know. And if you decide to inherit from me, then you have to provide the implementations to these methods. So an interface makes it easier for you to abstract information. It means in real time, whoever depends on that class will not depend on the interface. That will depend on the interface. All right? And the dependency injection container is going to take that dependency and resolve it with a class that really obeys to that, which we're going to do in a minute, but I want you to understand, okay? So in our case, we've got the movie repository here. It implements from the iMovie repository, and it has given you the implementation of all these things, okay? Step number one, we brought the abstractions using an interface. I want you to go to the module controller, okay? Then I talked of what I called the dependency inversion principle. We want to, as we are constructing our class, to know what our dependencies are so that we can also construct them together with our class. All right, so it means we've got movie repository here, which we had done earlier. I want you to comment that out. Now, I spoke of constructor dependency injection. It means this requires to have a constructor. So you're going to press ctrl. It's a snippet. This is going to bring you a constructor. Now, instead of us using the movie repository as it is, we're going to use the interface. So movie repository, call that movie repository. All right. And then go to the movie repository and control dot. I want you to select create and assign field with the small caps there. And what I like is to put an underscore over there. Okay. What have we done? Now we're saying, when you're constructing the movies construct, I want you to give me an instance of the movie repository. And here I'm also constructing it. Now, if you notice here, I'm no longer depending on any class. It's just an interface. Okay, nice. All right, so all you do is just copy the repository and just change it over here. Just change it to be that repository. All right. Okay. And I think for the sake of demonstration, let me not change it now. Let me not change any code from down here. What I'll do, I'm gonna call this movie repository. Okay, I'll just put an S. This is purely for demonstration. I want to show you something that we don't have to really change the code. So what have I done here? I've just said this movie repository, use this instead of this, and I haven't touched anything down there. But guess what? It's still going to work. What makes it work now? That should be the question. That's where the dependency injection container comes into play. So go to your program class.cs, and I'm going to put a comment here. I'm going to say registering services, registering repository. Okay. So here we're telling the container, you know what? We want you to resolve this. Okay. So you're going to take the builder, and then you're going to say services, and you're going to say add scoped. This is what we call service lifetimes. If you're confused, I'll put a link in the description. I've got a great video on service lifetimes. It's gonna help you a ton. But all add scope does is it, if you can show me the comment, it's not? Okay, let's do this. Add scoped. Add scoped just, it says add scoped service. It's not running anything, but it's fine. Just check that video. It's really great, I promise. So add scoped, the first argument it takes there is subtraction. So iMovie repository. The second argument it takes is the actual implementation. So movie repository. All right, now let me talk about this a little bit. This line is very important. If you don't put it, it's gonna throw an error. This line is saying, whenever you see an iMovie repository, all right, go and use this class. Use this class so that you can as your implementation. Okay. So when you start the controllers here, it sees iMovie repository. It's going to go ask the dependency injection container. Okay, it's an interface. An interface has no functionality. It just states what the functions are. So it means on its own it can do anything. So when the controller sees this, it will ask the dependency injection container to say, well, how do I handle this? Then the DI container here, it will say, fine, you've seen a repository, then use the movie repository. Okay, I'm going to do a very good example after we do this. Now at this juncture, what can you do? Well, let's try to run it. So Control Shift Control F5, Control F5. Okay, and I haven't even changed any of the controller code. I have kept it as it is. All I've changed is just I've brought in an interface. That's all I've added, but the rest is still the same. Alright, so our Swagger loads. I'm gonna keep this fast because we've done it already. We're just trying to verify if it's working. So I'm just gonna do for the first two to see if we can get. There we do, double impact. Let's just try to get one. Alright, just to save time. Alright, there you go. So what are we saying? You might ask, say, but I don't really see the importance because to me, well, it just looks basic, and I understand. Now, what happens? Okay, I want you to think of a scenario. What happens if somebody comes tomorrow and says, you know what? I don't want to use this in-memory database anymore. This one, I want us to go and use an actual database. My question to you would be, if you're going to use this dependency here using a class, it means you're going to come here and change the class implementation, and then you're going to go inside here and change everything. Do you have that time? Now, let me show you real quick. Let's assume of that scenario. So somebody says, you know what, we want us to use another way of doing it. What do? So I want us to do something that really, we're not going to change the movies controller at all. We're just going to change one place. So let's say your boss says tomorrow, so go to the repository and add a class, call it new feature repository. So your boss says, we want to use another way, so new feature repository. He will say, we want to use another way, all right, but we want to have the same functionality, but instead of using a list, maybe you want to go to database. Of course, we won't do it here, but we'll do it after this video, but I want to show you. So what do? You want to have the same functionality, but you want to have a different approach. Then first step will be, okay, fine, who has the contract of that functionality? It's an interface. Then first thing is you're going to say movie interface, because you want to have that functionality, because the interface will force you to use that functionality. And if you look at here, it's telling you you have to implement these things. So it requires you to implement things, all right? So if you press Control dot, choose implement interface. So the interface will dictate whatever you want to have. So now you see, you have all of these functions, but we just want to use one, get all movies. When you use get all movies, using this new feature repository, all I want you to do is just return a list. You just want to have one movie, okay? This is just purely for demonstration purposes. Return list. We're going to have one movie and new movie. It's going to be ID of 1. The name of the movie is going to be cool feature. And you know what, we're going to make this cool feature so cheap. We're going to make it, let's just go down, not take too much space. Cost is going to be 0. All right. Now what error are you getting? Non-invocable can be used as a method. Yeah, it has to be a new list. Is it? Okay. So this one, all we're doing is we just want to return one thing, right? So ideally, or normally, what you do is you go to the so you're going to copy this class. Ideally, you'd go to the constructor, to the control other, and you'd say, fine, I want to use that. Then you say new repository. You're going to create a repository. You're going to say is equal to new repository feature. And once you've done that, you're going to copy this and come to the get all movies here, and you're going to say you're going to comment this out, and you're going to say, well, give me the repository dot get all movies. That's what you do. Then you can return okay like that, right? And this would work. Return okay, and this would actually work. But if you look at it, you're bringing in a lot of code, a lot of change. With a repository, there's no need to do that. It means we don't need to have that over there. So I'm going to uncomment everything out. So you don't need to have that. Okay, you don't need to have that. All you do is to tell the container, instead of using the movie repository, whenever you see this, I want you to use the new feature repository. Just that. Or you change just one line of code. You won't even touch your controller. Let's test it. Control F5. And if you're the browser, it's loading. Now I'm going to try to get all movies, because that's the only thing that we've actually implemented. If you do get all movies, try it out. And what do you get? You get the cool feature. And tomorrow boss says, you know what, we want you to go back to the old method, and all you do is fine. It's okay, boss. You just go to your dependency injection container and say, if you see this, then just go back to the movie repository. All right, and you're done. So congratulations, you've implemented dependency injection. So you've done dependency inversion principle DIP, and you've done IOC, inversion of control. All right, so we've implemented our dependency injection and our repository pattern. Now we want to connect this repository rather, to an actual database. So we're going to use a SQL Server database. Now, if you're using Visual Studio by now, we're going to use what we call it has a SQL Server built in, so you don't need to use an external application. So we're just going to keep it at a minimum. All right, so we're going to use Entity Framework Core as our object relational mapper. All right, they're also called ORMs. So an ORM is just simply the interface that gives you access to talk to a database. So it tells you how you add, how you can remove or search your database. So you don't really have to know how SQL actually works. All you have to do is just follow the conventions which it gives you. And we're going to use Lambda expressions. The same way we've been dealing with that list will technically be the same way we're going to handle things like database interactions. So I want you to create a folder, just call it data. So I click on the project, select add new folder, call it data. If that could okay, so data. Now for you to access Entity Framework, you need to have a context. That context will be the entry point to the ORM. Okay, so you play with the context to get to your database. So we need to add the context. We're going to call it movie DB context. It could be anything, but usually it has to be a name that really makes sense. And if somebody sees your code, they can actually understand that okay, they're referring to the what? To a context. So this context will give you the possibility to talk to a database. It's very, very crucial. Okay, so we're going to call it movie DB context. So I have installed a couple of dependencies, a couple of NuGet packages that deal with Entity Framework. So if you click your project, you're gonna go to manage NuGet packages. So I've done them ahead of time, I don't want you to wait on me installing these things. So if you look at my installed apps, okay, no, it appears I have not installed them yet. So let's go to browse. So you go to browse, you're going to type Entity Framework Core, and we're going to install a few packages that give us access to this ORM. First of all, you're going to have to install Entity Framework Core itself. So we're using 6.0.2. That's how stable it is. So install that. All right, okay to that. I accept. Then after that, I want you to go and install entity.core. What else do we need? You could add design. I think that's, so you're gonna add design. And then we're using a SQL Server database, so you need to have a SQL Server extension. If you're using Postgres, there's also a .postgres extension. So you're also going to install that. Nice. And then you're going to have, finally you're going to install the .tools. So this should be enough to allow you to use the SQL Server. So there, we're done. The next thing is to actually instruct the database context on what tables we need. All right. So I want you to go to the movie DB context. The first thing you need is to inherit from the DB context. So this is a class from Entity Framework. So this gives you the capability to actually pair on with the database. So I want you to control dot so that you can bring in the Entity Framework code dependency. All right. Now, bring in a constructor, ctor. It's going to take in what we call the DB context options. It's a generic class, DB context options, and it takes the name of the context. In this case, it's movie DB context. Let's just call that options, and we're going to get from the base. This should be enough for the constructor. Now, what tables do you want to have in your database? In our case, it's one table, but in a normal case, you could have multiple tables. So the table we want to create in our context is the movies table. So we use what we call a DB set. The DB set is generic. It takes in the table you want. So we want to get from the movie table. We're going to bring the movie in, and that table is going to be called movies. Now, one thing that I want us to do is to just put in some seed data, to seed in some data that when we start our database, we are going to have that sort of data. So what we're going to do here is we're going to override. There's a method, it's called on model creating. Is it on model creating? So what does this do? This just says, as you're creating the model, I want you to do these things. So if you're using what we call fluent validation, this is where you can put things like primary keys, constraints if you want to. This is where you put those things. So you're going to remove that. So I just want to seed the movies table with information. So what do? I'm going to play with this object. Then I'm going to say model builder dot, you want an entity, right? The movie entity. I'm going to say there's a function called has an extension method called has data, and this one just takes in whatever you want to pass it. So I want to have as data. So we're going to bring in a new movie like so, and we're going to say ID is equal to 1, and the name is going to be just a seeded movie, and the cost, we call that 200, and close that. You can add as many movies as you want. So all we're saying is, as you're building this database, we want you to add that, right? And I want you to go to the models and go to the movie, and let's just add what we call annotation. So this is going to help us with those migrations. We're going to say this ID should be key. So key means it should make it a primary key as it is creating, okay? You could say I want the string to be required, so it should be required. It should not be now, for instance. So you could actually decorate those data annotations here, which are going to help doing migrations. So pretty much we're done with our context. And what's next is to link our application to the actual database. So where does it exist? We need to know. All right. So like I said, there's this app settings.json class which just lets you do these things, these connections, these things that can change whilst the app is running. So we're going to put what we call a connection string. So this string is going to give us access to it. It's going to let you know where the database exists. So connection strings. All right, like that. So you could have multiple connection strings. In our case, we're going to have one. I'm going to call it default connection. Now, if you're using the one that comes with Visual Studio, you're going to, obviously, what you're going to do, first of all, you're going to put server, and you're going to put in parentheses local DB. So local DB. / Then you're going to put / //mssql local db. So you don't know that this is defined the local db within that. And a database needs to have a name, so you gotta give it a database name. So I'm going to say database is equal to movie API DB. And then you could bring in what we call a trusted connection. So sometimes you'd have to put the actual username. If you're using a SQL Server, say Express or SQL Server Standard, you give it a username and password to go there. But in this case, trusted connection, if it's equal to true, that should give you access to your database. So this has to equal true. All right, so let's go through this again. We're saying use the local Express within Visual Studio, call that name movie API DB, and this trusted connection. All right. Okay, so the next thing would be to, now it means entity framework is a dependency, so we have to register this entity framework into the dependency injection container. So we're gonna go to the program class.cs. So we also need to register here the SQL Server database. Okay, so we need to register the database. I could put a comment there, registering a database. Now, as of .NET 6, the way you access the app settings here is kind of different from the previous. So we're going to use what we call the configuration manager to have access to this app settings to JSON. So first of all, let's try to add the configuration first. Configuration. So you're going to say configuration manager, and that will be your configuration is equal to builder the configuration. All right, so we've taken the builder there, which we put in the end. We've added our configuration. This configuration will be used to access things that are in the app settings.json. All right, so because we'll need to extract this default connection, that's where the configuration is going to make so much sense. So let's proceed. And now on that builder, we're going to say, okay, take the builder, and on the services, which it depends on, we want you to what? To add a DB context, and it takes in your context class. In our case, it's movie DB context. So we could bring that in, control that, and then it takes in a lambda, a predicate. So OPT, so OPT is equal to OPT, and then you're going to use SQL Server. Again, bring that in, use SQL Server, and that takes in that configuration there, and then dot, there's a bit called get connection strings, and it just takes the name of the connection string, which in this case we want this default connection. All right, could be a little bit confusing, but it's pretty much straightforward. So we're saying add a context, this context in this case, then we want you to run, the predicate would be for the connection string, it'll be the default connection. So now you've linked your actual application to your JSON file. All right, so what's next? The next sort of business now would be to create a repository that now lets us talk to the database. We've built two repositories, one that talks to a list, the other one we're just trying to see how the importance of dependency injection. Now we're going to build one that really talks to the database. So I want you to create a repository, call it movie DB repository. So create a class, call that movie DB repository. Okay, so now we're adding the database access, but the functions will still be the same, which implies we will still use the same interface that dictates that we do a certain type of functions. So I want you to go to the iMovie repository interface, and I want you to add one method And this method is going to be called bool save changes. Okay, you might be asking, what's the significance? So the significance is, in order for you to save to a database, you have to call a function called save changes. Unlike a list, this one, you need this function to persist, all right? So by adding one function to the interface, it means the other classes are going to complain because it's a contract and you have to give it all the interfaces. Okay, so you should expect to get an error here. It's supposed to complain. It will say one more is missing. Although we won't use this ones, but we could just implement the save changes for this one and the one we did for the new feature, just for the sake of, okay, to avoid it making errors. All right, so let's go to our MovieDB repository. So this is going to inherit from the iMovie repository, and this interface is going to dictate what we need. So let's control dot and let's implement those interfaces. And there we are. All right, so how do we do this? How do we proceed to do this? Now, one of the most important things for us to do this is, for you to talk to a database, you're going to need to have the context. So the context is a dependency in this case. So since we're using dependency injection, we're going to bring in a constructor, ctor, and this will depend on what? The movie DB context, like so. So we're gonna bring that in, and we're gonna have is it in? Control dot. All right, so we're gonna call this context. Control the context, and then just create and assign a field to it. I prefer underscores. All right, so what are we saying? The moment you're constructing the MovieDB repository, we want you to new up a context as well, because that will be needed. It's a dependency for this class to function. Okay, so now for you to create a movie, it's very simple. So you don't have to know any SQL. All you have to do is just follow the convention of any framework. So it says for you to create a movie, first of all, get the context, then dot, you're going to get the table. In our case, the table is called movies, and then add, and you're just giving the movie. It's that simple. And then we're going to turn the movie. You see, I don't even know SQL in this case, but it's we have just added to the database. For you to delete, what do you need to do? So for first of all, you're gonna need to know what the movie is. Okay, so it's gonna be movie, and then you're going to go to the movies table and search by ID. And if that movie is not equal to now, then you're going to say, I need the context, then I need the movies, then I need to remove. And remove text in what? The text in the movie that's come back. And you're going to return to this guy a movie, like so. Otherwise, you're going to just throw an exception, throw a new argument null exception. Throw a new argument null exception. Just say movie not found. It's that simple. All right. How do you get our movies? Well, so you're going to say var movies is equal to, just get the context, movies, and just send them to a list, like so. And just return the movies, and you're done. How do you get a movie by ID? Well, we have that. So for you to get a movie by ID, all you have to do is search if it exists. All right, if it exists, return the movie. If it doesn't, or you could throw an exception, just tell it, well, that movie doesn't exist. Easy. How do you update a movie? So okay, how do you save changes? So you're going to say context dot save changes. Oh, sorry about that. You're going to say save changes. So let's save changes, but we want it to be a boolean so that we should know for a fact that we have really saved it. So if you've saved something, the count is going to be higher than 0, so that if that evaluates to true, then if that's true, then it's going to give you a true there. All right, how do you update a movie? Well, we could use the same concept here. Copy that, and we're gonna come here. Then if it's not okay, now since there's a movie there, it's going to be a problem. But just say movie from repo or from database. Or from database. All right, then you're going to say you want to change something. So you're going to say movie from database dot the name is going to be equal to the movie you've given in the name, and you're going to say movie from database dot cost, and we're not going to change the cost here. And once that works, you're going to return the movie. But before you return the movie, you have to say context dot movies, and there should be an update, right? Update. What does it take in? An entity. So the entity would be movie from database. Okay, like so. So we're saying whatever comes from there, change it, and then update it. If it doesn't exist, then you're going to throw an exception. So we have done our repository here. What's next? The next thing is to go to the controller, right? But after this video, we know that we don't have to change anything here. There's nothing to change here because the repository has been done there using our movie DB. So instead of touching the controller, all we do is go to the database. All we do is go to the programmer CS, go to our container, and change the movie repository to movie DB repository, and you're done. So at this juncture, before we run it, we have to do something very important, and that is running a migration, because this database is not yet created. So before we test it, we have to run a migration, all right, so that we can add it. So I want you to go to tools, and then NuGet package manager, and then choose the package manager console, and I'm going to bring it up. Then you're going to say add migration. You call that an initial migration. So it's going to go through our database context and see what table is there. Then it's going to try to create that table based on the module. So it's going to look at the word required, it's going to look at the key which we had put there, and it's going to create an SQL query that will be run to create that sort of database. So it's going to build the application first. We see it succeeded, and then it's going to apply the migration. All right, let's see what it has done. You would see that now we've got a folder called migrations over here. So the class that it creates takes in the name of the migration, initial migration. So you see there are two methods. There is the app method, there is the done method. So the app method is saying create table, call it movies, and you're seeing SQL Server identity. It means it's going to auto increment there. You see there's a decimal. It's creating a primary key because it's in the ID, and it's inserting data there, which we had put in there on model creating. And if you were to drop the migration, it's going to drop the table if you run remove migration. So to make the migration final, you're going to put in a command called update -database. Press enter. So it's going to now effect those changes into an actual database. All right. So let's just wait. Some of these warnings are because I haven't really put precision to the decimal thing. So if you want us to do something to do an entity framework, we could do that and actually deal with all of this. So it says done. That means it's actually created that. So click view and go to SQL Server Object Explorer. That's where you play with the SQL Server within Microsoft Visual Studio. Technically any Visual Studio that I've worked with. You'll see that there is SQL Server there. I want you to, the first one, the local DB, open it. Databases, there's a movie API there, DB. Scroll down, select tables. And instead of the one table, which is movies you've created, we're going to have two tables. And there's a reason why, which I'm going to show you. So the first table is migration history. So this just tracks all the migrations. As you're doing, it's going to go into this table. The second one is movies. So let's right click on it and select view data. So we expect our database to have, our table to have at least one entry, which we had added in the seeding phase. So there you go, you've got a seeding movie. So we've got one thing here. Now there's one thing that I have forgotten. If you go to the movie DB repository, we've got this function called save changes. So this one is the one that will be used to save changes into the database if you're adding or updating. So this one is essential. It's needed for you to save the changes. So there are ways in which people do it. Others might put it in the create method here. So they're going to add it here, dot save changes. Well, in this video, I'm going to add it in the controller. So we're going to change the controller code a little bit. That's just my way of doing it. But you could actually come here and say context dot save changes. This would work just as this. But I use this approach because this one gives me a boolean that it has actually gone through. Hence why I use it this way. So I'll change the controller a little bit just to accommodate this change, but you could use this way, it would work perfectly. All right, so what really changes the database? The ones that get don't change, but the ones that update, add, and remove those changes. So you're gonna come to the post, which is the one that you create. And the moment that you create there, I want you to say movie repository. So movie repository. Okay, movie repository dot save changes, right? So there you go. It could come there, and then what else is changing the data? This one. You could say movie repository. Save change. Movie repository. Movie repository. If I can type that would be nice. Dot save changes. Okay. All right. And the one for delete. So we could actually debate whether it could come here or you could put it in the if statement. If it's not now, you could come there, but this is just pretty much for demonstration purposes. All right, so even there, it could come there. So I think we're done. Let us press Ctrl F5 and test it out. Let's try to get a movie. try it out. So we're gonna see that we're gonna get the movie we seeded, and you see the ID is 1 there. Okay. Now I want us to create a movie. Now the ID in our database is auto increment. Alright, so whatever we do here doesn't really matter. So let's put a movie code that did play here at $800, 8,000. Execute. We see it's created. You can create another one. Call it Star Trek. At $1,000. Just want to create, and let's try to get all the movies. You see, you've got 3 movies. All right, and get all movies. Let's try to put the ID for Star Trek, which is 5, and that gets you Star Trek. And Star Trek is at $1,000. Let's try to change that to okay. So let's select put ID 5. Star Trek. Let's just put ST and put 200 over there and execute. Let's see it's changed. Let's verify by getting our movies. And there you have it. And let us delete the Star Trek, put 5, execute, and there we have it. All right, when we get our movies, we're going to find 2. So this video was pretty much just us trying to test .NET 7. And I feel like we've gone way ahead. I'm going to stop it here for now. There are things we could do. Things like when you're creating a movie, and the ID here is auto increment. You don't have to show the user the ID there because it's not necessary. So we could bring in auto mapper. I think we could do that part 2. So we could bring in auto mapper, we could bring in things like error handling, we could bring in things like API logging, we could bring in things like command query responsibility separation. There's a segregation. There's a lot of what we can bring in, but if I keep on going, I'm not going to finish this video. So I'm going to stop it here. And I just want to thank everybody who has stayed with me this far. I mean, it's been fun just playing around with .NET 7 framework. You know, it's just less than 2 weeks old. And if you've been with me this far and this thing has given you any value, then please subscribe, like, comment, and share. And you do have a lovely day ahead of you. Thank you very much.